It's Wednesday wockiness tonight. Mir EO on the space shuttle, EO-19 returns home after 75 days of orbital odyssey. Cromwell's crushing conquest, siege of Drogheda, ends in massacre and mayhem. And Staten Island peace train, British and American leaders try to derail the American Revolution. Plus, coming up, we ask the experts, can a chicken wearing a top hat and monocle really predict the future? Yes or no? Those are the headlines. Time to flush the news.
That's it do, News Bang, bringing the power of fact to the forefront unapologetically. Date 1995.
The United States and Russia have joined forces to launch the first ever intergalactic circus act. The Mir EO-19 mission, disguised as a space exploration endeavor, was revealed to be an elaborate scheme to entertain extraterrestrial life forms with zero-gravity acrobatics and cosmic clown routines.
Eyewitnesses report seeing American astronauts juggling vodka bottles while their Russian counterparts performed backflips in cosmonaut suits. One bystander, Dmitry Vodkovich, exclaimed, "I've never seen such coordination between our nations. It's like the Cold War never happened."
The mission's true purpose was exposed when a rogue transmission intercepted by ham radio enthusiasts revealed plans for a galactic variety show aimed at impressing potential alien overlords. NASA spokesperson Buzz Lightyear defended the mission, stating, "If we're going to be invaded, we might as well go out with a bang, and a few somersaults."
1649.
Breaking news from Drogheda, where Oliver Cromwell's forces have just unleashed a brutal siege that's left the town in tatters and the local populace utterly flabbergasted. Eyewitnesses report scenes of utter carnage as Cromwell's troops stormed the city walls, wielding everything from muskets to particularly pointy sticks.
Local resident Seamus O'Flaherty described the chaos. "I was just sitting down to my porridge when suddenly the air was filled with screams and the sound of Englishmen shouting, 'God is on our side.' I thought to myself, well, he's picked a right bastard this time."
In a shocking twist, Cromwell himself was seen leading the charge, his warts glistening in the Irish sun as he bellowed, "I've come to bring you the gift of Puritanism, whether you want it or not."
The siege has left Drogheda's pubs in ruins, with one distraught bartender lamenting, "How are we supposed to drown our sorrows now?" Meanwhile, local cows have reported a marked increase in Protestant conversion rates.
1776.
British and American leaders engaged today in a heated game of Monopoly on Staten Island, New York, in a desperate attempt to settle their differences and avoid further bloodshed. The high-stakes match, which lasted for over 6 hours, saw Lord Richard Howe repeatedly landing on Benjamin Franklin's Park Place Hotel, while John Adams struggled to get out of jail.
Eyewitnesses report that tensions reached a boiling point when Edward Rutledge accused Lord Howe of hiding houses under the board. "I saw him slip a little green house into his powdered wig," exclaimed Prudence Butterworth, a local fishmonger's wife.
The conference ended in chaos as Franklin flipped the board, sending tiny plastic houses and hotels flying. "Give me liberty or give me boardwalk," he reportedly shouted before storming out.
Lord Howe, visibly shaken, was heard muttering, "I should have stuck with Cluedo." The failed peace talks have only served to solidify America's commitment to independence and their disdain for British board game etiquette.
News Bang, an impeccable slice of truth garnished with bullshit.
And now for a weather forecast more unpredictable than a bag of weasels. It's the one and only Shakanaka Giles.
Hello, hello, hello. Down south, expect showers so heavy they could drown a gnat's picnic. Brolly's at the ready, folks. Up north, things are looking decidedly breezy. Winds so strong they could blow a Yorkshireman's flat cap clean off, and straight into the Irish Sea. The Midlands will be experiencing a peculiar phenomenon: raining cats and dogs. That's right, viewers, actual cats and dogs falling from the sky. Best keep your pets indoors and maybe invest in a sturdy umbrella. And finally, in Scotland, a plague of locusts. Biblical, I tell you. Those poor Scots won't know whether to reach for the fly swat or the deep fat fryer. And that's all the weather.
(1649).
Hold on to your hats, because Cromwell's gone full-on biblical on the Irish. He's laying siege to Drogheda, and it's a right proper bloodbath, the kind that would make a vampire faint. Word on the street is that the river boynes turned into a giant vat of tomato soup, and those poor Irish lads are dropping like flies in a hailstorm. To give us a taste of this historical horror show, we go live to our man on the ground, Brian Bastable, who's currently dodging musket balls and rogue clergymen. Brian, tell us, is it as gruesome as they say?
Martin, Drogheda looks like a butcher's shop exploded during a leprechaun riot. The stench of blood is thicker than a Guinness on a hot day, and I swear I just saw a crow pecking out a soldier's eye and using it as a monocle. It's that kind of day. Cromwell's lot are like demented butchers in iron helmets, Martin, hacking and slashing their way through the town like they're auditioning for a slasher flick. I just saw a chap trying to surrender with a white flag made from his own underpants. Bless him. Didn't end well. The streets are slick with blood and despair, Martin, and the only sound louder than the screams of the dying is the sound of Cromwell's psalm singing echoing through the ruins. It's enough to turn your hair white, or at least a rather alarming shade of puce. This is a day that will be etched in the Irish memory, Martin, a scar on the soul of a nation. The ghosts of Drogheda will haunt these streets for centuries to come, whispering tales of Cromwell's brutality and the price of defiance. This is Brian Bastable, Newsbang, signing off before I get caught in the crossfire between a musketeer and a bloke with a very sharp pitchfork.
1981.
Iran's Ayatollah Madani met his maker during prayers today, courtesy of a disgruntled MEK agent with impeccable timing. The assassination sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving the government shaken and stirred. Clerics wept, dissidents cheered, and the regime tightened its iron grip. It was, as they say, a real Iranian standoff. For more on this explosive story, we go to our crime correspondent Ken Schitt.
Good evening, you slack-jawed sons of bitches. It's 1981, and while you're busy jerking off to Dallas reruns, Iran's going to hell in a hand grenade. Literally. Ayatollah Madani, a big cheese in the Shia world, just got his ticket punched during Friday prayers in Tabriz. Some MEK nutjob decided to play hot potato with a live grenade, taking out the Ayatollah and 3 other poor bastards in the process. Now, Madani wasn't just some run-of-the-mill holy roller. This cat had clout. He was Khomeini's right-hand man in East Azerbaijan, wagging his finger at the faithful and keeping them in line. But the MEK, those revolutionary rejects, they've got a hard-on for chaos. These MEK maniacs are like a dog with a bone, gnawing at the government's ass. They're pissed off that their slice of the revolutionary pie got snatched away, so now they're throwing grenades like confetti at a fucked-up wedding. The government's response? They're going apeshit. Arrests, executions, the whole 9 yards. It's a bloodbath out there, folks. And the Shia community? They're wailing like banshees, calling Madani a martyr and cursing the MEK to hell and back. This isn't just some random act of violence, you numbskulls. This is a power play, a bloody chess match where the pawns are getting blown to bits. And mark my words, this is just the beginning of a shitstorm that'll make your head spin. Ken Schitt, signing off. Now go hug your kids and thank your lucky stars you're not in this mess.
1776.
On this day in 1776, the fate of a nation hung in the balance, along with a rather awkward silence. The setting, the Staten Island Peace Conference. The players, British and American delegates, gathered to avert a revolution. The beverage, lukewarm tea. Lord Howe, representing the British Crown, arrived bearing a rather condescending olive branch, a return to colonial status for the American colonies. A generous offer, you might think, but the American delegation, led by a certain bespectacled gentleman with a penchant for lightning rods, had other ideas. Independence. That's right, those plucky colonists wanted to trade their tea taxes for, well, no taxes at all. For more on this diplomatic game of chicken, we go to Hardiman Pesto.
Martin, I'm here on Staten Island, where the air is thick with tension and the smell of gunpowder. I've just witnessed a heated exchange between some powdered wig-wearing gentlemen that could change the course of history.
Pesto, are you telling me you've actually observed the Staten Island Peace Conference of 1776?
That's right, Martin. I managed to sneak into the conference room disguised as a particularly ornate hat stand. The British chap, Lord Howe, he's not happy. Keeps muttering about ungrateful colonists and perfectly good tea wasted.
And what about the American delegates? What's their stance?
Well, there's this fellow Franklin, bit of an odd duck, kept trying to fly a kite indoors, but he was quite adamant about this independence lark, wouldn't budge an inch.
Pesto, are you absolutely certain you're not confusing Benjamin Franklin with Mary Poppins?
No, Martin, I'm quite sure. Though come to think of it, there was an umbrella involved at some point.
Right, let's bring in our expert. We're joined by Professor Bertrand Spitfire, historian and author of Wigs and Warfare, Fashion in the American Revolution. Professor, what's your take on this pivotal moment?
Well, it's clear that this conference was doomed from the start. The British were operating under the delusion that they could simply pat the colonists on the head and all would be forgiven. The Americans, on the other hand, had already tasted freedom and weren't about to give it up for a cup of Earl Grey.
Fascinating. Pesto, did you manage to overhear any specific proposals or counteroffers?
Oh yes, Martin. Lord Howe offered to rename New York to Newer York as a gesture of goodwill. John Adams countered by suggesting they rename England to Old America. It went downhill from there.
Pesto, I'm beginning to suspect you're not actually at the Staten Island Peace Conference.
I most certainly am, Martin. Look, I can see George Washington crossing the Delaware right now.
The Delaware crossing happened months later, Pesto.
Did I say Delaware? I meant Staten Island Sound. He's crossing that on a jet ski.
A jet ski?
Yes, it's quite impressive. Very ahead of its time.
Professor Spitfire, would you care to comment on Pesto's observations?
I'm afraid Mr. Pesto's account is about as historically accurate as claiming the Boston Tea Party was catered by Starbucks.
Thank you, Professor. Pesto, I think it's time you came clean. Where are you, really?
I may have gotten a bit turned around. I appear to be at a Revolutionary War reenactment in New Jersey last week.
Pesto, you're fired. And rehired. Because unfortunately, you're still the best we've got.
To-do, Sisti. 2001.
And now, a somber reminder of a day that shook the world. 22 years ago, on September 11, 2001, the United States faced an unprecedented attack on its soil. 4 airliners, commandeered by al-Qaeda terrorists, struck iconic targets in New York and Washington, claiming nearly 3,000 lives. The repercussions of this tragic day continue to reverberate through global politics and security measures. For more on this, we cross to our American correspondent, Melody Wintergreen.
It's a day that will live in infamy. 23 years ago, the unthinkable happened right here in the heart of the nation's capital. On this very spot, al-Qaeda's dastardly plot to strike at the very core of America came to a devastating climax. As the nation still reels from the horrors of that fateful September morning, the ghosts of 9/11 continue to haunt this hallowed ground. The Pentagon, once a symbol of American military might, now stands as a grim reminder of the fragility of our safety and the ruthless determination of our enemies. On that day, Al-Qaeda's fanatical foot soldiers transformed this fortress of freedom into a fiery tomb, their hijacked airliner slamming into its western facade with bone-shattering force. Amid the acrid smoke and chaos, brave first responders rushed to the scene, battling the inferno and searching for survivors. But for 125 Pentagon personnel and 64 innocent passengers and crew, it was already too late. Their lives snuffed out in an instant, their dreams and aspirations extinguished by the cold, calculating hatred of our adversaries. As the nation mourns, we must also steel our resolve, for the battle against terrorism is far from over. The scars of 9/11 may have healed, but the wounds in our collective psyche remain raw. And as long as there are those who seek to destroy our way of life, we must remain ever vigilant, ever prepared to defend the liberties that make America the shining beacon of hope for the world. This is Melody Wintergreen, reporting for Newsbang at the hallowed grounds of the Pentagon, where the echoes of that fateful day continue to reverberate through the ages.
And our news bang, the harsh light of truth scouring the debris of fictionalism. Date 1995.
And now, our science correspondent, Calamity Prenderville, brings us a special report on a truly stellar achievement in British space exploration.
Welcome back to Science Watch. Today, we're blasting off into space with a tale of British ingenuity that's out of this world. On this day in 1995, the Mir EO-19 expedition returned to Earth after 75 days in space. But did you know this mission was made possible by a breakthrough from Peckham Polytechnic? That's right, their revolutionary space cuppa technology allowed astronauts to enjoy a proper brew in zero gravity.
The mission, led by British cosmonaut Nigel Crumpet, saw the first successful docking of a space shuttle with the Russian Mir station. This feat was achieved using a giant magnet salvaged from the Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
While in orbit, the crew conducted groundbreaking experiments. They grew the world's first space chips, tested the effects of microgravity on Morris dancing, and even attempted to make a proper Yorkshire pudding in space.
But it wasn't all work, and no play. The astronauts enjoyed nightly games of space darts using a board invented by a retired pub landlord from Grimsby.
The mission's crowning achievement was the deployment of the Core Blimey module, which allowed astronauts to complain about the weather in real time, no matter where they were in orbit.
As the crew touched down, they were greeted by a welcoming committee of confused sheep and a brass band playing the theme from The Archers.
This mission paved the way for future space endeavours, proving once and for all that British innovation knows no bounds or gravity. This is Calamity Prenderville, signing off from Science Watch. Now, who's for a cuppa?
D2000. News Bang. A place for facts where truth is the only game in town. 1851.
And on this day, in 1851, a federal posse met fierce resistance in Christiana, Pennsylvania, as escaped slaves and free blacks fought for their freedom. The bloody clash, sparked by the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, left slave owner Edward Gorsuch dead and the nation reeling. The subsequent Christiana treason trials failed to secure convictions, further inflaming tensions between North and South. For more on this pivotal moment in American history, we turn to our religious affairs correspondent, Pastor Kevin Monstrance. Pastor Kevin, how did the church respond to this violent upheaval?
Good evening, my dear flock. I hope this fine evening finds you well. I myself am feeling particularly blessed, having just narrowly avoided a run-in with the producer. Poor chap was in quite the state, frantically searching for his misplaced hairpiece. I offered to lend him my spare toupee, but he declined, muttering something about it being too holy for his tastes. Ah, well, I suppose that's showbiz for you. But on to more pressing matters. Today, we commemorate a truly remarkable event from history. Picture it. Christiana, Pennsylvania, 1851. A time when the Fugitive Slave Act had the nation in a right tizzy. This dreadful law essentially turned the entire country into one big slave-catching posse, if you'll pardon the expression. Even in the free states, folks were obligated to help round up escaped slaves and return them to their owners. A real moral conundrum, to be sure. Well, on September 11th of that year, a group of brave souls decided they'd had enough. Led by a man named William Parker, this band of escaped slaves and free blacks took a stand against injustice. When a federal posse came a-knocking, seeking to arrest some fugitive slaves, Parker and his comrades fought back tooth and nail. It was like something out of a dime novel, I tell you. Now, this whole kerfuffle came to be known as the Christiana Riot. A bit of a misnomer, if you ask me, seeing as it was really more of a righteous rebellion. But I suppose riot does have a certain ring to it. Rolls off the tongue better than the Christiana Fracas or the great slave catcher thrashing of 1851. Anyway, the fallout from this event was quite the spectacle. The participants were arrested and put on trial for treason, if you can believe it. Treason for defending their freedom and the freedom of others. It's like accusing a man of robbery for taking back his own stolen property. Utter nonsense. But here's where the story takes a delightful turn. You see, the prosecution in these trials was led by none other than our dear producer's great-great-grandfather, Jeremiah Hangman Bang. Oh, he was a piece of work, let me tell you. Rumour has it he once tried to convict a horse of grand larceny for eating a judge's wig. The man had a real flair for the dramatic. So old Jeremiah throws everything he's got at these defendants, trying to paint them as the worst sort of criminals. But the jury, bless their hearts, saw right through his antics. In the end, not a single person was convicted. It was a stunning victory for justice and a real black eye for old Hangman Bang. Now, I'm not one to speak ill of the dead, but I can't help but wonder if our producer inherited some of his ancestors' theatrical tendencies. Just the other day, I caught him trying to convince the janitor that the studio was haunted by the ghost of a disgruntled vaudeville performer. Poor janitor nearly quit on the spot. But getting back to the matter at hand, the Christiana Riot was a turning point in the fight against slavery. It showed that there were folks willing to risk everything to resist this evil institution, even in the face of federal opposition. It was a spark that helped ignite the flames of abolition across the nation. And that, my friends, is why we remember this event today. Not just as a historical curiosity, but as a reminder of the courage and conviction it takes to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. It's a lesson we could all stand to learn, especially in these trying times. Well, I'd best be wrapping things up before our producer has a conniption. I think I hear him bellowing something about a missing script page. Knowing him, he probably used it to line his pet parakeet's cage again. Ah, well, duty calls. Until next time, my dear flock, may the good Lord bless and keep you. And if you happen to see a wayward hairpiece blowing down the street, do give our producer a holler. He'll be ever so grateful. Good night.
And finally, a look at tomorrow's papers. The Times. U-boat sinks. Laconia, then changes mind. The Telegraph. Japanese army begin battle to take back Henderson Field. The Guardian. Mahler's big one goes down well in Munich. There's a picture there of 1916 singers. While the Mail lead with trees refuse to bend in wind. And that's it. Now it's time for our outside broadcast team to join the festivities at St. Michael's Hall, Grappenhall. Tonight, Sports Review of the Year with Robbie Weezersort. Until tomorrow night. So until then, have a painful absence.
Tune in next time for more artificially intelligent hilarity. News Bang is a comedy show, written and recorded by AI. All voices impersonated. Nothing here is real. Good night.